cool night air whispered through the cane fields, carrying with it the faint scent of rum and tobacco from the nearby town. I sat on the rickety porch of my farmhouse, staring out into the darkness, my mind a tumultuous sea of doubt and desire. My name is Miguel Sanchez, and in the year 1924, I found myself questioning everything I had ever believed in. Growing up in rural Puerto Rico, faith had always been an integral part of my life. The Catholic Church was more than just a building. It was the beating heart of our community. Every Sunday, without fail, my family would don their best clothes and make the journey into town for Mass. The rituals, the incense, the solemn prayers, they had all been a source of comfort and guidance for as long as I could remember. But lately, a creeping sense of doubt had taken root in my soul. It started small, like a tiny seed planted in the fertile soil of my mind. At first, I tried to ignore it, to push it aside with fervent prayer and renewed dedication to my faith. But the seed grew, nourished by the questions that plagued me day and night. Why did God allow suffering? Why did the Church condemn the very desires He had instilled in us? And most troubling of all, what if there was no God at all? These thoughts tormented me, but they also opened up a world of possibilities. If there was no divine judgment, no eternal damnation awaiting sinners, then what was stopping me from indulging in the pleasures I had long denied myself? The answer came in the form of La Rosa Roja, the local brothel that stood on the outskirts of town. Its red-painted walls and dim, flickering lights called to me like a siren's song. I had passed by it countless times, averting my eyes and quickening my step, but now I found myself slowing down, stealing glances at the scantily clad women who lounged in the windows. The realization of my own desires filled me with a potent mixture of excitement and shame. I wanted to visit La Rosa Roja, to experience the carnal pleasures it offered, but the guilt that came with that desire was overwhelming. It was this internal conflict that drove me further from my faith, pushing me towards agnosticism, and I feared eventual atheism. As I sat on my porch that fateful night, wrestling with these thoughts, I had no idea that my crisis of faith was about to become the least of my worries. For something dark and ancient was stirring in the shadows of my land, something that would test not just my beliefs, but my very will to survive. The first sign came in the form of a scream, high-pitched and terrified, cutting through the still night air. I jumped to my feet, my heart racing as I peered into the darkness. The sound had come from the direction of the chicken coop, and without thinking, I grabbed the old oil lamp hanging by the door and set off to investigate. As I approached the coop, the smell hit me first, a metallic, coppery scent that turned my stomach. The chickens were unusually quiet, and a sense of dread settled over me like a heavy blanket. I followed the tracks with my eyes, watching as they led off into the cane fields. And there, at the edge of the flickering lamplight, I saw something move. It was just for a second, a fleeting shadow darker than the night itself, but it was enough to send me sprinting back to the safety of my home. That night, I barricaded the doors and windows, my mind racing with possibilities. What kind of creature could do such a thing? The old stories my grandmother used to tell came flooding back, tales of the Chupacabra, the blood-sucking monster that preyed on livestock. But those were just myths, weren't they? Bedtime stories to keep children from wandering off at night. As I lay in bed, sleep eluding me, I couldn't help but draw parallels between my current situation and my crisis of faith. Both involved questioning long-held beliefs, confronting the unknown, and grappling with forces beyond my understanding. It was almost comical. Here I was, doubting the existence of God while simultaneously fearing a mythical creature. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. I checked on my animals obsessively, but there were no more attacks. Just as I was beginning to think I had imagined the whole thing, it happened again. This time, it was one of my goats found dead in the same gruesome manner as the chickens. Word spread quickly in our small community, and soon my farm became the center of attention. Some neighbors offered help and support, while others whispered about curses and divine punishment. The local priest, Father Alejandro, paid me a visit, his kind eyes filled with concern. "Miguel, my son," he said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "I've heard about the troubles on your farm. Perhaps this is a sign that you should return to the church. In times of darkness, faith can be our greatest light. I nodded politely, but inwardly I bristled at his words. How could I explain that it was precisely this kind of thinking, attributing everything to God's will, that had driven me away in the first place? Instead, I thanked him for his concern and promised to attend the next Mass. As Father Alejandro was leaving, a new visitor arrived. Her name was Isabella Vega, and she was unlike anyone I had ever met. With her short, bobbed hair and trousers, she stood out like a sore thumb in our conservative community. She introduced herself as a folklore enthusiast and researcher, drawn to our town by the rumors of strange animal deaths. I've been studying the legend of the Chupacabra for years, she explained, her eyes shining with excitement. And I believe that what's happening on your farm might be the real thing. I was skeptical, to say the least, but as Isabella shared her knowledge, the history of sightings, the consistent patterns in the attacks, I found myself being drawn in. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time since the attacks began, I felt a glimmer of hope. If this creature was real, then perhaps it could be stopped. Over the next few weeks, Isabella and I worked together to investigate the attacks and set up defenses around the farm. We spent long nights talking, not just about the Chupacabra, but about life, beliefs, and our place in the world. I found myself opening up to her about my doubts, my desires, and my fears. "You know, Miguel," she said one night as we sat on my porch keeping watch, "faith doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's okay to question, to doubt. In fact, I think it's essential. Blind faith can be just as dangerous as no faith at all." Her words struck a chord within me. For so long I had seen my doubts as a weakness, a failure of character, but Isabella helped me see them in a new light, as a natural part of growth and understanding. Isabella was beautiful, intelligent, and free-spirited, everything I had ever wanted in a partner. But I hesitated to act on my feelings, still grappling with the guilt and shame ingrained in me by years of religious teaching. Our investigation took an unexpected turn when we discovered an old journal belonging to my great-grandfather. Hidden away in a dusty trunk in the attic, its pages told a chilling tale. According to the journal, our family land had once been the site of a Taino settlement. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they massacred the natives and built a church on the sacred ground. The last entry in the journal spoke of a curse placed on the land by a dying Taino shaman. He prophesied that a beast would rise from the blood-soaked earth, feeding on the descendants of those who had desecrated the holy site. The description of the beast matched perfectly with the creature we were dealing with, the Chupacabra. This revelation shook me to my core. If the curse was real, then everything I had been taught about good and evil, about God and the devil, was called into question. The lines between myth and reality blurred, leaving me more confused than ever. As Isabella and I delved deeper into the mystery, a new complication arose in the form of my cousin, Carlos. He had always been jealous of my inheritance, the farm that should have been split between us, but had been left solely to me. When he heard about the troubles I was having, he offered to help, but I could see the gleam of opportunity in his eyes. "Primo," he said, slapping me on the back with false camaraderie, "why don't you take a break? Go into town, enjoy yourself at La Rosa Roja. I'll watch over the farm for you." The mention of the brothel sent a jolt of guilt through me. How did Carlos know about my secret desires? Had my inner turmoil been that obvious? I declined his offer, but the seed of temptation had been planted once again. That night, as Isabella and I prepared to set a trap for the Chupacabra, I found myself distracted by thoughts of La Rosa Roja. The guilt, the desire, the fear, it all swirled together in a toxic mix that threatened to overwhelm me. I needed to focus, to protect my land and my animals, but part of me wanted nothing more than to run away from it all. Our trap was elaborate. We had set up a series of spring-activated foot traps around the property. Each trap had a string attached to a series of old cans. It would make quite a racket when sprung, along with traps blessed by both a Catholic priest and a local spiritualist. As we waited in the darkness, the tension was palpable. Hours passed with no sign of the creature. Just as I was beginning to think we had wasted our time, one of the alarms went off. That clattering of cans was easy to hear and locate in the night. Isabella and I raced towards the sound, our hearts pounding in unison. As we approached, we heard a blood-curdling screech, inhuman and filled with rage. In the beam of our kerosene lanterns, we caught our first clear glimpse of the Chupacabra. It was like something out of a nightmare. Reptilian skin stretched over an emaciated frame, with glowing red eyes and a mouth full of needle-sharp teeth. But what struck me most was the intelligence in those eyes. This was no mindless beast. It knew we were hunting it, and it was angry. The creature lunged at us, moving with impossible speed. I pushed Isabella out of the way, feeling the rush of air as claws narrowly missed my face. We managed to fire a shot using the Winchester carbine, but the bullet seemed to have no effect on the monster. Behind it, we could see a hole in the side of the house. We missed. In the chaos, I lost sight of Isabella. Panic gripped me as I heard her scream, followed by the sound of tearing fabric. I ran towards her voice, my mind filled with horrible images of what I might find. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. Isabella was on the ground, her shirt torn and bloody, but she was alive. And standing over her, looking more shocked than I felt, was Carlos. In his hand was a bloody knife, and at his feet lay the remains of our trap, cut and dismantled. "Carlos?" I gasped, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. "What have you done?" My cousin's face twisted into a sneer. "What I should have done years ago, Miguel. This farm should have been mine. I've been feeding that creature, making it stronger, all to drive you away. And now, I'll be the hero who saves the day and claims what's rightfully mine." Before I could react, the Chupacabra burst from the shadows. But instead of attacking Isabella or me, it went straight for Carlos. I watched in horror as the beast tore into my cousin, his screams of agony filling the night air. Blood sprayed an arc, painting the cane stalks a glistening crimson in the moonlight. Isabella and I ran, our minds struggling to process what we had just witnessed. We made it back to the farmhouse, barricading ourselves inside as the sounds of carnage continued outside. All through the night, we huddled together, jumping at every sound, wondering if we would live to see the dawn. When morning finally came, we ventured out with trepidation. The farm was in ruins, fences torn down, animals slaughtered, the fields trampled and bloody. Of Carlos, there was no sign, save for a few scraps of clothing and a trail of blood leading off into the wilderness. As we surveyed the destruction, I felt a profound sense of loss. This land, which had been in my family for generations, was now tainted. The curse, it seemed, had finally run its course, but at what cost? Isabella turned to me, her face pale but determined. "We need to leave, Miguel. This place, it's not safe anymore. The Chupacabra is still out there, and who knows when it might return." I nodded, knowing she was right. But as I looked out over the ruins of my farm, I realized that something had changed within me. The events of the past weeks had shaken me to my core, challenging everything I thought I knew about faith, about good and evil, about the very nature of reality. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would meet them head on. With that, I gave the locals in town a day to gather my livestock and supplies, and I quickly sold the property to a robber baron. I'll leave this nightmare to him to deal with. The Chupacabra was still out there, a living embodiment of the sins of the past and the horrors that lurk in the shadows of our world. But as I turned away from my ancestral home, hand in hand with Isabella, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever darkness lay ahead, we would face it together, armed with the knowledge that reality is far stranger and more terrifying than any myth or legend. And as for my faith, well, let's just say I'm taking it one day at a time. After all, in a world where the Chupacabra exists, who's to say what's really possible?